So now we're ready for our player to start picking up items. In this case, we're going to have a flower that enables the player to shoot fireballs. To get started, let's go into the artwork folder and look for the flower. Here, we'll drag this into the scene and place it near the ground. We'll add a Box Collider 2D to the flower, and we're going to set this to trigger. This way it doesn't act like a solid object when the player walks into it. Now, back in our scripts folder, let's go into the collision folder and create a new class called Collectible. Now we'll open it in MonoDevelop. Now let's create a public property that'll keep track of the type of game objects that are able to pick this up. We'll make a public string, and we'll call this target tag. In this case, we'll just set it to player. Now let's delete the start and update methods, since we won't be using them, and we'll take advantage of a built-in method that colliders will automatically trigger called onTriggerEnter2D. This will supply a collider 2D, and we'll call this target. Now, before we actually pick this up, we want to make sure that the target equals our target tag. Now, we're going to want to call two methods in here, one to trigger the onCollect, and the other to actually destroy the item. Before we do that, we're going to actually have to create them. Let's make these protected virtual methods. We'll start with the onCollect. Here we'll supply a game object of the item that picks it up. Next, we'll create the onDestroy that'll destroy the item once it's picked up. And here we'll simply call destroy on the game object itself. Now, back inside of our onTriggerEnter, we'll call onCollect and pass it in a reference to the target's game object. Next, we'll call onDestroy. Now let's save this script and go back into our game. Now let's select the PowerUp Flower instance in our hierarchy panel and clean up its name. From there, we'll add the collectible script to it. If we save our changes and run the game, we'll see this work. But before we actually do that, we need to take care of one last thing, which is set the player's tag to player. Player is already set up by default inside of Unity, so we'll just change this to player and now run the game. As we walk over to the flower, you'll see it disappears, and we've in essence picked up the flower. Now, before we move on, we're going to want to come up with a specialized class just to handle the logic of the Power Flower. This will enable us to equip fireballs onto the player when we're getting ready to shoot them. So let's create a new folder in scripts called Items. And inside of Items, we'll create a new script, and we'll call this PowerUp Flower. Inside of MonoDevelop, we'll simply have this extend our collectible class. For right now, we'll just save the changes, go back into our game, and drag this script over to the PowerUp Flower, and we'll remove the original collectible script. Let's also drag this over to our prefab folder so that we can make this item reusable later on. We'll save our changes and run it one last time to make sure that we can still collect the flower. Next, let's look into how we can actually equip the player so that we know that we've picked something up.